People often think a house is just a place to live. But for a spiritually awakened soul, home is more than shelter. It's a mirror of the inner world. Every wall, every shadow, every quiet corner says something about who we are. And sometimes, when the outer world becomes too loud, that mirror is the only space still clear enough to see our true face. There are evenings when you walk through the door, close it behind you, and a strange emptiness rushes in. It's not the emptiness of loneliness. It's the feeling that all the roles you've played outside have just fallen to the floor. For a moment, you are no one. You don't need to speak. You don't need to perform. You don't need to prove anything. You are simply here, bare, still, and real. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is not absence, it is presence, presence with the self." That paradox holds the first key to awakening. The emptiness we feel when we are alone isn't a sign of lack, it's a sign of beginning, the moment when the soul finally has room to breathe. The modern world turns us into performers. We wear mask after mask, smile when expected, react on cue, stay busy enough to forget what we actually feel. But when the lights go off and the stage is empty, there's a silence that rises, a silence that asks, "Who am I when no one is watching?" That question is the soul's first whisper, and it only speaks when things get quiet. Jung believed we move in two directions, outward to adapt to the world, and inward to understand ourselves. When we spend too much time outward, in comparison, noise, and constant pressure, we lose connection with the self, that deep inner center. And when that happens, the soul sends signals: fatigue, restlessness, a sudden wish to disappear for a while. Those moments aren't failures. They're invitations to return. People call it emptiness, but in spiritual language, it's sacred space, the pause between what is ended and what is yet to begin. It's the silent in-between, the womb of transformation. And like every sacred process, it often feels lonely at first. Imagine walking into an empty room. At first, the silence feels heavy, unsettling, but stay there long enough and you start to notice how the space holds possibility. You start to hear things you missed before, the hum of life, the beating of your own heart, the quiet pulse of your soul. Spiritually awakened people don't seek quiet because they fear the world. They seek it because they've finally heard something deeper calling them home. And they know that to hear it clearly, they must step into stillness. Jung compared the soul to the ocean. When the surface is rough, all we see is the chaos of waves. But deep beneath the surface, the water is always calm. When we live too long on the surface, chasing noise and approval, we forget that depth exists. Only in stillness do we begin to descend, to meet the parts of ourselves that have been waiting, our memories, fears, tenderness, and quiet strength. It's strange, but the more time you spend alone, the less alone you feel. Because there's a presence inside you that has always been there, patiently waiting. It doesn't judge, it doesn't demand, it simply wants to be seen. Jung called this the self, the central light of our being. When you finally feel that presence, even for a second, you realize the emptiness was never your enemy. It was the doorway between the world of the ego and the world of the soul. It's the threshold where healing begins. But here's the paradox. Most people only touch this space when they're too exhausted to keep pretending. When they sit down, not to meditate or achieve peace, but because there's simply nothing left to give. And in that surrender, truth begins to rise. Home, in its deepest sense, is the space where we no longer need to wear a mask. When the door closes, we return to our original frequency. That's why spiritually attuned people love being home, not to escape, but to listen. Because you can't hear the voice of the soul while standing in the middle of a crowd. But stillness has two faces. One heals, the other hides. Only complete honesty with ourselves can tell which one we're living. If stillness feels open, light, expansive, it's healing. If it feels tight, shrinking, fearful, it's avoidance. The line between them is thin, and only deep listening can reveal where you stand. And that's the first challenge of coming home to yourself, to stay in the emptiness long enough to tell the difference between fear and truth. The physical house is just a metaphor. The real home Jung spoke of lives inside your mind and heart. When you sit still between four walls, you're not isolating. You're entering the inner temple. And within that temple, there's a landscape waiting to be explored. A landscape that reveals itself only when you stop moving. Sometimes in that silence, old echoes return. Laughter you once forgot, a sadness you never faced, a memory that still vibrates somewhere deep. They don't come back to punish you. They come to be seen, to be held, to be released. They rise because you've finally given them space to breathe. So if you ever feel empty, don't rush to fill it. Let it stay. Let your home and your heart have room for silence. Because inside that silence, something gentle is whispering, I'm still here. And when you start to hear that whisper, pause for a little longer. Because what happens next is subtle but powerful. Your body begins to feel the world again. The breath becomes softer. The light feels warmer. Scents, textures, and tiny sounds come alive again. That's how the awakening begins, through the senses. When the soul starts to open, the senses become its first messengers. And if something inside you feels quietly alive right now, a calm pulse, a soft invitation to come home, keep it with you. Let this space be your reminder. If you wish to walk deeper into this kind of reflection, you can subscribe to this channel, not for more content, but for a place to return to. A space where every story is a doorway back to yourself. When the soul begins to awaken, the senses are the first to know. They become sharper, quieter, and somehow more honest. It's as if the world that always surrounded you starts to come alive again, not louder, but deeper. Morning light touches the wall. A single beam slips through the curtain, changing the color of the room. Nothing special is happening, yet everything feels awake. Every detail holds weight, presence, meaning. Carl Jung once said, "The soul speaks in images." It doesn't speak through logic or analysis. It speaks through sensation, through the body, through the way light moves, the way air feels, the way your breath softens when you finally stop running. In the modern rhythm of life, the senses grow numb. We look, but we don't really see. We hear, but we don't truly listen. We eat without tasting. We touch without feeling. We move through the world as if half asleep. But the moment we slow down, the body remembers. It remembers how to be here. The feel of the floor beneath your feet, the distant ticking of a clock, the scent of tea drifting through the air. Ordinary things become sacred again. Jung believed the body is the doorway to the unconscious, the part of the soul that took shape in matter. Every genuine sensation is a small descent into that deeper realm. When you truly feel something, you're listening with your whole being. Most people think the spiritual journey happens in the mind, but it always begins in the body. When the body rests, the mind can finally hear. The body is the root, the spirit is the flower. Without the root, the flower cannot bloom. Picture yourself sitting in a quiet room. You're not doing anything, just breathing. And suddenly, you notice how much is already happening. The air touching your skin, the shimmer of light on a glass of water, the faint sound of wind at the window, all of it has been there all along. You just weren't present enough to notice. For Jung, uniting consciousness and the unconscious is not some abstract idea. It's the act of becoming whole, right now, in this breath. And that wholeness begins through the senses, where mind and body finally meet. The senses are not only how we experience the world, they mirror our inner state. When we're anxious, even small sounds feel loud. When we're afraid, light feels harsh. But when we're at peace, the world softens with us. How we perceive the world is how the heart speaks to itself. In Jung's language, this is reintegration, the coming back together of what was once fragmented. And that reunion starts with the smallest things, tasting cool water and knowing it's fresh, feeling fabric and noticing its warmth, seeing a ray of light and letting it move you. Small moments repeated often, that's how the soul heals. Someone once asked Jung, "How can I find God?" He said, "Pay attention to how you feel when you wash your hands." People laughed, but it wasn't a joke. To be fully present in the smallest act is to touch the divine. The sacred hides in the ordinary, waiting for the moment we finally feel it. Notice how sometimes, when you open a window in the morning and let the light pour in, something inside you brightens too. Nothing mystical, just alignment. The inner and outer worlds breathing together. That's the quiet miracle of sensing. When you feel the world feels you back. And on a deeper level, returning to the senses frees the body from what the mind has stored away. Unfelt emotions live in the shoulders, the throat, the chest, the stomach. When you listen through the body, you give those memories a way out. A single deep breath might bring tears. A gentle light might bring calm. That's not random, that's release. Jung called it healing through embodiment. When the soul has been denied, the body carries its memory. But when you come home to your body with awareness, you're telling your soul, "I'm ready to listen." And the body, faithful as ever, begins to answer. Think of life as a piece of music and your senses as the instrument. When you rush, the notes blur. But when you listen, the melody returns. You don't need to force connection with the soul. Feeling is the purest form of prayer. Do you remember the last time you truly listened to rain? Not just knowing it was raining, but hearing each drop strike the roof, smelling the damp earth rise to meet the air. In that moment, you are not watching the world, you are part of it. And in that moment, you come home. To return to the senses is to relearn how to live as if everything were sacred, because everything is sacred. We just forgot how to see. The leaf outside the window, the sound of your breath, the morning light across the floor. They never left you. You left them. When you touch the world with awareness, something shifts. The border between you and life dissolves. There is no "I am seeing," only seeing is happening. No "I am listening," only sound is unfolding. The ego fades into presence and the soul quietly smiles. So never underestimate the small things. They are the gateways to meditation, to clarity, to rebirth. Every time you truly look, listen, or feel, you step closer to the home within yourself. And when the senses grow calm, when the body softens, a new door opens, a door leading inward to the place where the voice of the soul no longer whispers, but begins to speak clearly. When the senses grow quiet and the outer noise fades away, you begin to hear something subtle, not from the world around you, but from within. They are the whispers of the soul, soft fragments of memory, emotion, and truth that you've spent years avoiding. At first, they're faint, like a breeze behind the curtain, like the heartbeat shifting between two breaths. But the quieter you become, the clearer they grow. It's like standing in a dark room long enough for your eyes to adjust and realizing there was a whole world inside the darkness all along. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Those whispers you hear, they are the doorway into that hidden world. They don't come to frighten you. They come to be acknowledged. They come to say, "I'm still here." Sometimes it's the voice of an old fear, the child who felt unseen, the dream you abandoned, the sadness you buried just to be loved. And sometimes it's the voice of longing, the part of you that wants to live freely, creatively, truthfully, all of them knocking gently, waiting for you to listen. This is where the real Jungian journey begins. Jung called this inner space the shadow, not evil, but everything we've rejected about ourselves. The shadow is not darkness. It's simply the place where light has not yet reached. When you start listening to these inner voices, you realize you are not just a single I. Inside you lives a whole community of selves, the angry one, the frightened one, the hopeful one, the quiet one. They are not enemies. They are exiles who just want to be seen and loved again. Jung often described the psyche as a house. The upper rooms are bright and orderly. That's the conscious mind. But deep beneath lies the basement, where the hidden parts of us wait. Most people fear going there, thinking it's full of monsters. But in truth, it's full of treasures we once abandoned. Only when you dare to descend do you find real freedom. Sit quietly for a moment and notice the voices inside your head. One tells you to try harder. Another says you've done enough. One wants to love. Another fears being hurt. They all speak at once, and you, the listener, are the soul witnessing them. Jung called this the sacred dialogue, the moment you begin to converse with your own unconscious. It doesn't happen through analysis, but through compassion. When you listen to the parts of yourself you once despised, they begin to soften, like ice melting under sunlight. That's what real healing is. Healing isn't about removing the pain. It's about making peace with it. It's not about silencing fear. It's about letting it speak. Because once fear's heard, it begins to shrink. Once pain is seen, it begins to heal. People fear silence because in silence, they finally meet themselves. And that's often harder than facing the world. But if you can stay, just stay, and listen without running away, you'll find those inner voices are not frightening at all. They're tender, honest, human. They are the soul saying, "Please, don't forget me." Jung also spoke of the inner companion, a quiet presence that walks with us through life. It's the friend within. When you cried as a child, it listened. When you laughed, it smiled. But as you grew up, you stopped hearing it. Listening to the whispers of the soul is the act of meeting that old friend again. You might sense it in small, ordinary moments, looking into the mirror and seeing something in your own eyes that wants to speak, washing dishes and feeling a wave of warmth from a forgotten memory, walking in silence and noticing emotion rising from nowhere. Those moments aren't random. That's the soul breathing again. When you learn to listen without judgment, you realize that no emotion is wrong. Anger, fear, guilt, sadness, they're all messengers. Emotions are like children. If you sit with them long enough, they stop crying. Jung believed every rejected feeling holds a seed of wisdom. When you face it, the seed sprouts. Out of pain comes compassion. Out of loss comes understanding. Out of fear comes strength. Nothing within you is meaningless. When seen with love, every part turns into light. And something beautiful happens. As you listen more deeply to yourself, you begin to listen differently to others, because the way you listen inside is the way you love outside. Inner silence becomes the cradle of empathy. At this point, you realize that listening to the soul is not an action. It's a state of being. It's the openness to let whatever arises simply exist. No fixing, no analyzing, just presence. In that presence, you no longer need answers, because being heard is already enough. A strange stillness fills you, not the stillness of a room, but the stillness of the spirit. The world outside hasn't changed. The same walls, the same light, the same breath, but something inside has softened. A fear has dissolved. A tenderness has awakened. It feels like meeting someone again after a long separation and realizing that someone is you. When that happens, there's no need to try anymore, no need to control, no need to define. You simply stay, listen, and allow the soul to keep speaking. Because in this silence, something extraordinary unfolds. The separation between you and yourself starts to fade. You're no longer searching for the soul. You are the soul. And that's when the real dialogue begins, not with words, but with resonance, not with thought, but with knowing. What you hear now is no longer a whisper. It's the clear voice of truth, the voice of the self, the meeting point of love and shadow, where both dissolve into light. When you begin to listen to the whispers of the soul, sooner or later you meet a familiar face, the face of your inner child. That child is not gone. It lives inside your memories, your reactions, and the moments you feel hurt but can't explain why. It has always been there, waiting for a gentle look, a quiet embrace without judgment. Carl Jung believed the inner child is sacred, the original, creative, and most innocent part of the human soul. It carries our first experiences of love and wonder, but also our earliest wounds. When that part is hurt, a silent emptiness follows us through life. That child once trusted easily. It laughed just because sunlight touched the floor. It cried simply because it cared. But as we grew up, we were taught to be strong, to be rational, to be good. We learned to hide our feelings to earn approval and survive the world. And in doing so, we walked away from ourselves. But the child never left. It simply went quiet, hiding deep inside the heart, waiting for you to return. Every time you feel drained, lonely, or overreact to something small, that's the child knocking, not to accuse you, but to whisper, "I'm still here. Please see me." Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine walking into a small, dimly lit room. A child sits there, knees to chest, eyes turned toward the floor. When you step closer, the child looks up, a mixture of fear and hope in their gaze. You don't need to say anything, just sit down beside them. Your presence is enough, because what the child needs most is not explanation, but safety. And when you sit there quietly, something begins to shift. The wall between past and present starts to melt. The fear, the sadness, the sense of being forgotten, they begin to soften. And slowly, the child looks at you with trust, because finally, someone stayed. Jung once said, "In every adult there hides a child that wants to play. Inside every grown-up, there is still that spark, curious, tender, and alive. When you care for that child, you don't regress, you return to life, you return to joy, you return to wholeness." To nurture the inner child is not to go backward, but to bring love from the present back to the places that were unloved. It's learning to say to yourself, "It's okay. You don't have to be strong right now. It's smiling when you're happy, crying when you're sad, and knowing you need no permission to feel. Sometimes healing the inner child means doing something beautifully simple, listening to an old song, walking in the rain, writing a few words to yourself, or placing a hand over your heart and whispering, "I'm safe now." Those small moments are sacred rituals of healing. When the inner child feels loved, the adult becomes free. You no longer need to pretend, to please, to chase validation, because you found the one who never left you, yourself. And when that child feels seen, the world also changes. Colors soften, people feel kinder, life stops being a race and becomes a gentle melody, sometimes sad, always beautiful. Jung said, "Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness. Healing is not about removing the cracks. It's about letting light pour through them. When the adult and the child, the light and the shadow, finally sit together without fear, the soul is healed." Now, take a breath and ask yourself slowly, what can I do today to make my inner child smile? Maybe it's a cup of cocoa. Maybe it's doing nothing for a while. Maybe it's simply saying, "Thank you for staying." Whatever it is, let your heart answer. It always knows. And if right now you feel a quiet warmth inside your chest or a single tear you didn't expect, don't push it away. That's the soul breathing again. That's the child opening their eyes, seeing you for the first time in years. If these words touch something within you, share this video with someone you love, someone who might need to remember that they are worthy of love too. And when you're ready, leave a comment below. Write, simply and honestly, "I have met my inner child." That sentence is more than a comment. It's a promise, a quiet vow that you will never abandon yourself again. When the inner child has been embraced, something quiet begins to happen. All the pieces of you start to return to their place. No part is left behind, no feeling is denied, and you realize being at home was never about a place. It was always a state of the soul. Carl Jung called this individuation, the moment when the ego and the self sit down together, not to compete, but to understand each other. When that happens, you stop living in the world and begin living with it. At this stage, stillness is no longer an effort. It becomes your natural rhythm. You don't need to find yourself anymore because you already are yourself. Everything around you, the light, the wind, the people, the noise, feels connected to your inner world. You no longer resist life. You listen to it. Jung believed that true healing comes when a person finds their inner center, a quiet nucleus within the soul that remains untouched by chaos. You can still be busy, still face pain, still walk through storms, but deep inside, there's a calm that never moves. And when you touch that calm, the world no longer feels like something to escape. It becomes a place to practice love, because when you carry your home within you, everywhere becomes a sanctuary. Whether you're walking through a crowded street, sitting in a cafe, or resting alone in your room, you feel accompanied. The part of you that was once forgotten is now walking beside you. That feeling is subtle. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like a breath, like wind moving through an open door. A soft gratitude rises through the body as you realize, I don't need to go anywhere. I'm already home. Home is not built with walls. It's built with self-acceptance. It's the space where you can be yourself without acting, without explanation, without the need to be understood. And perhaps now you see, every search, every loss, every detour was never a mistake. It was the soul's way of guiding you home. Those who have been wounded understand peace more deeply. Those who have known darkness cherish the light more tenderly. Those who have been lost Feel the miracle of returning. And together, these experiences soften the heart toward yourself and toward everyone else. You begin to see the world through new eyes. There's no longer a line between me and them. Because when you feel at home within yourself, you recognize that every soul is on the same journey home. And in their stories, you see reflections of your own. This is where compassion becomes understanding. Not pity, but the quiet knowing that we are never separate. Love stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. The home inside you is no longer just a shelter. It's a light, not bright but steady, a soft flame that warms and guides. It lights your path, and it lights the way for others still finding theirs. Picture this. It's evening. You're sitting by the window. Outside, the city hums. Inside, there's only your breath, slow, gentle, alive. Nothing about your life is perfect, but somehow you no longer need it to be. Peace has stopped depending on control. It has become the natural consequence of acceptance. When you understand this, everything becomes simple again. Joy no longer depends on what happens. It grows from how you meet each moment. You stop performing. You start being. You stop running. You start breathing. And then, in one quiet instant, you realize the home you've been searching for has always been here, in your hands, in your heartbeat, in the soft rhythm of this breath. You are no longer a traveler wandering for belonging. You are the one who has returned. And when you are truly at home within yourself, you don't keep the peace to yourself. You radiate it, gently, naturally, the way flowers release their fragrance into the air. No effort, no words, just presence. Because in the end, the deepest healing is simply being able to sit in stillness, look around, and smile. I am home.